Welcome to the Programmatic Summit. Just a couple of things to get you into the mood. I think it's always good to start with a quote, and this was one I just stumbled across yesterday. Let's be honest and admit that most of us marketeers, former marketeer, are Model T Ford drivers in a 747 cockpit. I love the honesty of Jodie Conning's comment and the piece that she wrote. And I actually felt that it really resonates with the challenge and the opportunity that we have in programmatic. There are those of you in the room who are steeped in it, who've built it, who've created it, and there are perhaps some new folk into the room who want to get into it because they recognize the inevitability of it. I just thought I'd also start with a quick question for you. Who's here for the first time? Show me your hand. So, those who have been at this event for the last 2 or 3 years, let's make the new folk who are here feel welcome. I think that's really, really important. It's a big opportunity as programmatic grows. So in addition to opening with a quote, it's also good to open with a data point. This was handed to me by our friends at Nielsen. 63% of 2016 ad impressions used programmatic or ad network services. So quite simply put, there's no question that programmatic is big. So, welcome to the day. We've got a packed agenda and a lot of good stuff to get through, but let me just run through some housekeeping to get us on our way. Firstly, thanks to the guys at Ashton Partnership. They've been flogging themselves as always, Mark and the crew, to make this happen, right through to about 3 seconds before we started. We've teamed up this year to bring you this event. They produce it, we curate it, so that's been fantastic. The event has grown. When everyone finally gets here, we reckon we'll have well over 400 of you. So I think someone is doing something right. It looks like it's getting bigger and better every year. Other important practicalities: Wi-Fi, ICC, no password is required. And for those of you who are using Trump's social channel of choice, the hashtag is Programmatic 2017. I just thought, if you would humour me, let's see if it works. I'm going to try and do a selfie with you, just to get the day going. So let's try this. I won't get all of you, but I'll try. There we go. Top of my head. Thank you. I'll post that in a second. We've also got, so make sure you use all of your favourite social channels. It's a massive opportunity. We don't get together that often to share questions and stuff we've learned and things that we feel are important. The guys at Ashton have thrown me this. Guys from Google will be very familiar because you throw one of these at me at your last event. When we get to Q&A, we won't be running around. This is a speaker. So the first person to answer a question will get this, and then you throw it around to the next person. So this is our mechanism for Q&A. Just get familiar with it. You can have fun with that. Hopefully you've got and seen the agenda. We're trying to run with as little paper as possible, as you would expect us to. It's actually, having said that, it's kind of printed outside, but there's the URL. If you've got any questions around the agenda, ask any of the team or go to the website of the event. And finally, I want to say a big thank you to all our sponsors, to all our speakers. You make this event happen. So we are, both from the IAB side and the Ashton side, are really grateful for the energy and the effort you put into this day. So let's get going. I think that's most of the housekeeping done. So I'm 6 months into the gig at the IAB, and this gives me a shameless opportunity just to spend a few minutes talking about where we've come from, where we are and what we're doing. Last week we announced a refresh of the IAB, and we set out a new strategy. So I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking to you about that. To get us going, I'd like to play a video, Spence, which will run through where we've come from, what we've done, and where we're going. Guys.
Since we started, digital has grown, and the IAB has grown with it. With industry leaders Nielsen, we have developed a world-leading digital audience measurement solution that employs best-in-class hybrid methodology to measure across all devices. And in 2017, we will launch daily digital ratings, giving brands and advertisers a clearer idea of how well their digital investments are working. These initiatives underpin the growth in digital ad investment. When IAB engaged industry partners PwC to measure Australian online advertising expenditure in 2005, it was $488 million. In 2016, the digital ad market was worth $6.8 billion. As the industry has gone from strength to strength, so has the IAB. We developed the standards and guidelines that literally set the industry standard. Our industry councils consist of the best minds in the industry, working together to create the research and resources that help build a transparent, trustworthy and thriving digital market. And not just in Australia. We have 44 offices across the world, making us the largest and most experienced digital trade group. We recently spoke to over 100 people from the leading companies in Australia and around the world. It helped us learn a lot about what the industry wants and needs. We learned that as digital advertising has grown, so too have the number of vendors and providers offering an ever-increasing array of technologies. It seems confusing and complex to a lot of us. And in this emerging reality, the IAB has new professional obligations. We need to simplify and inspire. To put things in terms people can understand, enabling them to take the necessary actions needed to regain control of their digital investments. To showcase the best examples and remind the industry of the unique benefits digital can deliver. Simplicity aids understanding. Understanding increases transparency. And that builds trust. Simplify. Inspire. It's not that complicated.
So it's not that complicated. And we are almost using today's event as a bit of a test bed, as a kickoff for that. I've written to every single speaker and panelist in advance of today to ask them to think about simplicity. Particularly, you saw the hands of new folk that are in the room. The opportunity is way bigger than just the folk in this room. We have an obligation and an opportunity to increase our community if we think about simplicity. So think about that across the day. All the speakers, all the presenters, let's cut the jargon, let's keep it simple. In parallel with that, let's make sure that we talk about all the magical things we do in digital and all the magical things we do in programmatic. So that opportunity to inspire. So what have I been up to over the last 6 months? As we said in the video, I've tried to speak to as many people across the industry, and it's been an incredible privilege in this role because most people take a meeting with you, and I've been able to talk to the four corners of the different industry, types of businesses and organizations. You've played back some strengths. We're known for independent measurement, the work we do with the PwC, the work we do with Nielsen. We've had a history of doing standards and guidelines. We are genuinely part of a strong global network, and I talk to the US and the UK and the other IABs regularly. And we're not bad at doing some training and events, so we've got a good foundation to build upon. But a few things you said to us was that we need to better represent the wider industry, and we're making changes to be able to do that. That we need to have a stronger voice on key topics. So watch your space, because that's absolutely my ambition. And we want to see more action from the IAB. So you wanted more action. So the last 6 months, as well as trying to sort of figure out our future strategy, we haven't been sitting on our hands. We pulled out an ad blocking study, one of the first in Australia with unique Aussie data, getting to the real facts on the state of ad blocking, and it's something we will do every 6 months. We think we've got a moral and professional obligation, if you like, to bring data to the key decision makers within the industry. And we're doing that with ad blocking. We've teamed up with Nielsen to produce a device ownership study that comes out pretty regularly. We worked with the Ad Tech Council to produce an industry tech study looking at the challenges and the opportunities within technology across the industry. A few weeks ago, we did our first digital audio event. So we brought together radio groups, pure play, streamers, supported even with the help of the CRA, so who says industry bodies can't work together, and produced an audio landscape event with this study at the heart of it. Probably a personal favorite, quite new into the role, working with 19 different companies to pull together a white paper on viewability. I think we live in a world where there are plenty of frenemies in the room, and we have to be able to collaborate for the greater good of the industry. And for me, we had our moments. It wasn't always easy, but we started and we got out some good output. Probably something that any member knows us for is our expenditure report that we work on with PwC. And we thought we should, for a week or so, make it available for non-members. So if this is something that a non-member is interested in, email us, quote prog 2017, and we'll share the whole study with you just for the next week or two. And then today we've announced Australia's first IVT benchmarks, again, thanks to the data from Moat, from Comscore, and from IAS. We've put that out into the market, and we've announced that today. We will continue to do that every 6 months, along with the viewability benchmarks that we put out at the end of last year. So, yeah, hopefully you agree that we've started really picking up the pace when it comes to action. You heard a little bit about that new mission, and I thought I'd just spend a minute or two explaining where that's come from. When you look across the entire industry, I think of our world as two halves of the brain. One half is full of what I call digital techies. There's plenty of you in the room today. You've been at the heart of digital since it started. Many of you have been involved in building things ground up. You know who you are. And I think if you look at the other side of the brain, and again, I go back to the quote we saw earlier today from Jody. You've got folk who've invested in digital. They might be traditional marketers, but often find it challenging. And actually, I think it's a two-way road. My observation is sometimes we talk in two different languages, and our opportunity is to come together and talk with a common voice. Because when it comes to the consumer, there is but one. And if we can bring ourselves to work together and try and do that, I think that's how we will grow. That's how we'll bring more transparency, and that's how we'll bring more trust. So I guess that's our mission. And I also think of the IAB not as a handful of folk in Surrey Hills, but I think of it as the 90-odd people that are in our councils, and those of you that are members and that care about this industry and care about making sense of it so that it will continue to grow and flourish. So I invite you all to come and be part of this. So, after Simplify and Inspire, we've set out new strategic priorities. And there are 4, but there are 2 that are absolutely the heart of this. Making measurement make sense. So we've already got a strong foundation when it comes to the work we do with audience measurement, and there's more to come with daily ratings. But we're going to build out new councils. We really want to look at ad effectiveness, because if I got $1 for the number of times attribution and ROI was mentioned, I'd go into early retirement. In addition to measurement, the other big priority is building a trustworthy digital value chain. Trust is a word that's been coming up a lot in 2016. I think it will continue to come up in 2017. And we've got an opportunity to really do some good work there and build on some of the great work that's already been done. And that's supported by the importance of building brands online and growing mobile value. So with that comes a new structure, and I won't labor on this, but to make 2 points, as you saw, 2 strategic priorities, 2 kind of areas of focus for the IAB around measurement and around tech, and more on another time about the detail of that. But that will be our focus, absolutely in parallel with our strategic priorities. We've refreshed the whole team, myself, a new chair, brought Gaylor Roy back, hooray, got the, I don't know if I can call him the godfather of tech or something better. He hates all the, I'm trying to find new branding for Jonas, but we're incredibly lucky to have somebody with his experience, a new Reg Affairs director, and also not on here, but really important, a new head of membership. So the entire team's gone through a bit of a refresh. So we're back, and we're here, and we mean business. So what next? Again, I won't run through all of this, but a lot of stuff around data in those 2 areas of measurement and building more trust in the digital value chain. So expect to see more. Get involved. We're only as good as the engagement you give us. And the final thing and thank you for those who took part. Later today, we're kicking off some podcasts. So the programmatic series from the IAB will probably go live later today. There's some phenomenal metaphors that some of the speakers I've interviewed have used to bring programmatic and digital to life, from fruit to wine to cartoon characters. Take the trouble to listen to them. They're pretty funny, but they're also pretty insightful. I will stop at that. I think I wanted to get you in the mood. I wanted to get you excited by what we're doing, and I'm going to hand over to the always dapper Sam Smith, the managing director of TubeMogul, who are now an Adobe company, and we'll get used to practicing that across the day. So, Sam, over to you.
If you feel like a room without a roof, clap along if you feel like happiness.
TubeMogul is now Adobe. I'm going to have to say that before every sentence that I speak today. But TubeMogul, that now is Adobe, is really proud to be part of this conference. We're really proud to support Ashton Media and particularly the Programmatic Summit. We have always wanted to encourage great discussion, great debate, and particularly incredible thought leadership. And so for us, it's really important to make sure that we can bring some great global speakers to come and talk about what they're doing abroad and how they can sort of bring some of that knowledge back into this market. I mean, we're also very proud of where this market stands on the global scale as well. So I think hopefully there's some things that we can educate them on as well. And that leads me into the first introduction, which is to Julie Keshmiry, who is the Global Media Director for Intel. And I have to read her bio out word for word because it's a bit of a quirky one. After coming to the realisation that her first career choice, monkey trainer, had limited opportunities, Julie set a course on a career in advertising. Julie has spent 20 plus years in media agencies overseeing the strategy and global operations of brands such as Microsoft, Schwab, and Apple. She's currently the Global Media Director at Intel. Julie lives with her family in Redwood City. In her free time, she enjoys cooking with friends, music, electronic music, travelling and hanging out with her husband and kids, and she still has a passion for monkeys. Welcome to the stage, Julie.
Thank you, Sam. I'm very excited to be here. I have the fortune of being in a role that is global, and so I get to travel to great cities all over the world, but I've never been to Sydney, so it's my first time here. And I always say that I have not met an Australian I didn't like. So that is not a challenge, by the way. So excited to be here and talk about our discussion with Intel. I'm going to need this. Intel's in-house programmatic quest. Christopher Booker wrote a book, and it talked about that basically there are 7 story plots in all of storytelling, regardless of what that format of story is. And those plots were really innate to human psychology, these ones here. Intel's story about bringing programmatic in-house is a quest story, one where the protagonist seeks a goal and faces obstacles and temptations along the way. You know, like the famous story, quest story of the Iliad, or Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, whatever you relate to more, no judging. And apparently this quest is gaining momentum. This is a chart from the WFA, and it talks about how from 2013 to 2016, the programmatic models that brands are using. And you can see on the left here, it's no surprise that agency trading desk models are still the dominant one. But what's more interesting is on the very right, you can see how in-house hybrid or in-house solutions are actually gaining momentum, right? In 2016, they were 21%, whereas 2 years ago, they were really just considered fringe. And of course, it's also interesting to talk about the independent trading desk model or a DSP managed service model that also is gaining momentum. And they were defining independent trading desk here as agencies, you know, not the trading desk within the holding company, but the agency solutions.
Intel 360 Replay makes...
A little bit ahead. There we go. So let me get a poll of where we are in this room. And I thought maybe the easiest way to do it is to talk about who the brands in the room. Can you raise your hand if you represent a brand in the room? Okay, a little higher, raise your hand higher. Now, let's get a sense just of a simplified version of, do you work with an agency, do you work with a managed DSP partner, or do you work in-house, even if it's hybrid in-house? So of those brands who raised their hands, how many of them are agency solutions right now? Right? And how many of them would be like a DSP managed partner solution? Okay, and any in-house, hybrid, or fully in-house? Yeah, right, so it represents a little bit of what we see right here overall. Okay, so before we get into our quest, I wanted to give you a little bit of backstory, character development, if you will, for Intel and what we do. Intel makes chips that go into things that compute. Laptops, phones, data centers, things that you wear. And so therefore, every time someone says something like, hey, we're building a connected toaster, we go, woohoo! Because if it computes, it has Intel technology in it. That's our vision. But really, I don't think that toast is the future of our business. But I'm sure there will be a day when all of us will go, how did I live without personalized toast? That day will come. What we really do get excited and what the future of our business is about large data. So if you think about virtual reality, artificial intelligence, autonomous driving, those are all things that require a large amount of data. And take autonomous driving for a second. The car itself, the self-driving car, needs processing power, it needs memory, it needs storage. These are all things that Intel makes. And then it has to connect to the data center, which also needs those things. So those kind of opportunities is what our company feels is where our growth is. And our marketing objectives are pretty varied because we have different audiences and different areas of focus. So on the consumer side, take laptops for example. We don't actually sell anything. We are the ingredient brand. So you guys are buying those products through Dell and Lenovo and Apple and those kind of companies. So my objectives and my KPIs are not demand gen. They're about more changing or increasing purchase intent. Now's a good time to buy that laptop. And on the B2B side, it is about driving leads, handing leads over to the sales team. And on the brand side, we are also wanting to make sure that we are a 50-year-old company, and we want to make sure we are still thought of as an innovative brand, and that our solutions are not just in laptops, they're in a variety of areas overall. So I brought you some examples of some of the work that Intel's been doing lately, particularly in the brand space, so you can kind of get a sense of what's going on. So Spencer, can you go ahead and play this first video? Actually, hold 1 second, would you? Because let me give a little bit of background on this. You probably saw some elements or heard about some of the highlights of the Super Bowl last month. And Intel actually had technology in the Super Bowl where we outfitted the stadium with cameras all around. Cameras, 360 degrees, cameras on the players. And so at some point in the game, the announcers could say, wow, let's go back to that amazing play that just happened. And they'd show the play, and then they'd pause and they'd do a 360 review of it. And it was Intel technology that brought you that because it sounds so simple, but doing something like that takes a lot of data to stitch together to get that view and a lot of compute power. So we had that type of solution in the game, and we got credit for it in the game. It was branded Intel, but we created this spot because we wanted to make sure that the consumer audiences also knew we were getting credit for that technology that was there. So now go ahead and please play that, Spencer.
Intel 360 Replay makes anything look epic. Literally anything. Wait till you see it in the game.
Enough. They get it.
Tom looks good in that spot. Apparently he is on some kind of gluten-free, sugar-free, vegan kind of diet, so I don't know what that pancake was actually made out of. Another thing that we did was we had our drones have a guest starring role in Lady Gaga's halftime show. And so here's a look at the behind the scenes of that one. Spencer.
One team, one moment, millions of people watching. This team of Intel pilots, engineers, coders, and designers created something that has never been done before. synchronized light show using 300 drones for Lady Gaga's halftime performance. Together, they pushed the boundaries of what's possible and created an amazing experience on the biggest stage in America.
So that's the kind of work we're doing to try to change your thoughts about us as a company. We're not just about Intel Inside, we're bringing great experiences to you as a consumer. And I share those range of objectives because we don't put programmatic in a box. We don't say that it's just for our consumer efforts, but not B2B. We don't say that it's just more for demand gen versus brand building. We will consider it across our full spectrum, thinking about the audience, the needs, and using that as our in for what's the right channels and what's the right buying methodologies. So let me go into our quest now. Once upon a time, this was probably about a little more than a year ago, all of our solutions for programmatic were handled by our agency. They handled the service, they handled the technology, they chose the solutions, and that meant that they owned the data. And even if I called up an ad tech company and I wanted access to the data, technically I couldn't get it. So like many brands, we had an epiphany about owning the data. We wanted to be able to make sure that the data was connecting across our marketing stack so that if we wanted to buy against information we knew from our CRM tools, we could do that. We wanted to make sure that if a tool was swapped out, we didn't lose that data. And ultimately, we just wanted to make sure we had the greatest understanding of our customers, their needs, and how to target them. So we chose to bring those contracts in-house, to own them directly. And to do that, to select the technologies, we had a DMP in place, but we did an RFP for a DSP. Okay, are you with me? I know that's not simplification. We did an RFP process for the DSPs, and we asked them both about their technology and their managed service. And this is a picture of the actual, one of the questions there. It needed to represent our range of objectives. So we asked things like, all right, what would you do to launch a brand? And then we also asked things like, how would we use first-party data to really get in and target healthcare? And I'm talking like oncology and genomic mapping. Did she just talk about toast and genomic mapping in the same presentation? Yes, I did. So, pretty extensive RFP, but it helped us a lot in the selection of our technology partners. And what's interesting as we were going through that, we had two realizations that did change our course about the service side of it and bringing that in-house. And they were around transparency and insights. So the first realization of transparency was the understanding of the financial model and our lack of transparency in it with the agency trading desk. Now, this was a year ago, so our industry has had tremendous amount of conversations about transparency, right? And I'm sure all the brands and the agencies in the audience have begun to address transparency in their relationship. But we probably can all agree that agency trading desks were a place where holding companies could make margin because they were getting so squeezed elsewhere. I think of it as a balloon, you squeeze one area and another area is gonna have to pop out. So for Intel, we wanted to make sure we were returning the most dollars to working media. And for us, that meant controlling the supply chain economics. It meant owning the contracts. It meant handling the service. And then on the insight side, we began to understand the dynamics and how much programmatic could help us discover about our audiences, not only to inform what we were doing with programmatic media, but our holistic media solution, and even the creative message so that we can get closer towards a personalized message, and even a product development roadmap. And so we had that understanding, and we began to feel that we could no longer outsource all audience insights to the agency. We needed to be the ones that owned and were closest to those audience insights. We needed to be the ones that were closest to those audience insights. So those are two reasons that we headed down this in-house model for service as well. This is what our programmatic model looks like. On the service side, we have an in-house team. I have 4 people who are handling that right now in the US for US activity. Right now, our regions, Intel is a regional model, and so our regions are handled by the agency trading desk. But the notion is we're migrating that, and that by the end of 2017, we'll have all the regions have in-house solutions as well. On the technology side, we have partners across ad serving, DMP, verification, DSP. Our agency makes use and works within our contracts where relevant. And so we've decided to go with the best of breed strategy there and choosing the best partners in each of the areas. So for the DSPs, we have 2 global preferred partners, Tube, now Adobe, and Google as the 2 of them. And again, that speaks to the capabilities that we think they bring to the table and the best of breed solution. So all good quests have obstacles and temptations, and I wanted to talk about those a little bit. I think complexity is an obstacle. That's going to be a theme in here, and it matches to what Vijay was saying earlier. Because if you think about it, in our world of advertising, programmatic is one of the more complex topics. And I needed to build a business case to sell into my finance partners, my CMO, my CEO. At Intel, yeah, this was a CEO level kind of conversation. And I need to make sure that we were very clear on the definition of it, the benefits to us, and what that model for us was going to look like. So I had to simplify that kind of conversation. And my analogy is, this is a picture of the Japanese flower arranging ikebana, which I'm a fan of. And the thing with ikebana, it's very Japanese, that it looks simple on the outset. But what's behind here is a lot of thought into the materials you use, the proportion against each other, the vase you pick, the environment it's in, and how you use negative space or don't use negative space. So simple output that's beautiful and has a lot of harmony to it, but a lot of complex thought to be able to get there. And I had to ikebana the crap out of my presentation. I had to work a lot on getting to that point to be able to sit across from the CEO and have a conversation, and it paid off because there wasn't a question that I couldn't answer by the time I got there. I also counsel us to avoid the temptation to think that one model is right for everyone. Because I'm talking about an Intel solution of in-house, I do not assume that that is right for all brands. So what I like about this chart, it's also from the WFA, is the notion that brands need to think about your strategic principles that matter to you, and that's going to be your deciding factor for what's the right model. So, for example, for Intel, on the culture side, we are an engineering company, right? The notion of data-driven insights, constant innovation, manage risk, that's inherent to the culture of our company, and a programmatic team is going to do fine in a culture like that. On the structure side, we are essentially driven, mostly, marketing kind of structure. So you could sell in a solution once, and you didn't have to resell it into a business unit, or region to region to region. And then I talked a little bit about data and technology and our desire for control and transparency, right? There still is a value proposition for agency trading desks and ease of integration and connection with the rest of what's going on in your advertising efforts. That's a big benefit too. But for us, control and transparency was important. And so when we also selected our DSPs, our preferred global models, we have to also accept from a regional perspective that, they are globally preferred, but what does it mean in China? China always needs its different solution. And would we have regions, we have to have a operating model that a region can say, hey, I have an instance where I want to use different technology than what you've selected, and why, and what does that look like? So all of those things. So again, if you're a brand in the room, I would say, think about your strategic principles, the things that matter to you, and use that as a guiding force for the right kind of model for you. And if you're an agency or ad tech in the room, I would also advise you to remember, We are not going to live in a one model world. So, what are your solutions? What are your products? What is your sales force doing to be able to address all those different models? Okay, so now that I've talked a little bit about Intel, I wanted to just end with a discussion about the industry, at an industry level, and some thoughts that I had there. Going back to those 7 stories, I think the industry level story right now is overcoming the monster. You know, like Star Wars, the Jedi fighting the dark side of the Force, or Seth and James fighting North Korea, whatever you better relate to. And the monster is a couple of things. The monster is complexity, because as an industry, we have our panties in a complexity bunch. There is a time and a place for conversations about data, technology, algorithms, but not at the expense of value and benefits and what I'm doing to understand my customer. We've lost that part of it. So I have a belief in what our marketing challenge of our time is. I think the marketing challenge of our time is how to use data to understand and connect with our audiences in a very deeply personalized way. And brands and tech companies and agencies who understand that and do that well are going to have a competitive advantage. So, yeah, keep the conversations about data, technology, algorithms. That is important. But let's make sure as an industry we elevate the conversations to make sure we're still talking about value and benefits and understanding our customers. I think the monster is also eating talent, because every single one of us is searching for the same talent in this room. We have a talent scarcity problem right now, and it's quickly going to become a talent crisis problem. And if you have one of those rare people who are like right brain, left brain, both good with data but able to create wonderful strategies from it, whew, hold on to them. So, as an industry, what kind of solutions can we put together? Academies, trainings, certifications, how is it that we can create a better pipeline so that we can meet some of the talent demands that we have? And finally, I would say the monster is complacent in the kind of conversations we're having with publishers. I think there's too much focus on high volume, low cost impressions. And that is contributing to our ad fraud problem. But can we get more creative with the kind of conversations that we're having to focus on those values and the benefits with our PMPs and our programmatic guaranteed kind of deals? So these are the things that are on my mind, things I'm interested in talking about as an industry. I'm here all day. If you have thoughts and want to talk about them as well, come and talk to me, especially if you're Australian. I love Australians. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Those people in the door, move through so you can get a seat. Thank you, Julie. That was amazing. Please take a seat just here. I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to ask, and then I'll throw it out to the audience. You want to stand or sit? You're right? I'll go up here. Firstly, you mentioned that you had to get your CEO involved and to get his approval. Why was that? And is that the case with any kind of media or any kind of a situation in the Intel business? It just seems that complexity and that story being presented to the CEO is crazy.
Yeah. It wasn't because we had to get the CEO to sign off on the headcount I was asking for. It really was because when I presented this to the CMO, he got it, and he was like, this is a great example of value and innovation and what we're doing in marketing. And he's thinking about, also on the creative side, you know, what we control, that control kind of transparency notion. He's thinking about that on creative as well, what we rely on in-house versus an agency. So he wanted us to share it with the CEO. And I'll tell you, there was a point in the presentation. So the CEO is an engineer. He's been at Intel like most of his career basically, and been the CEO for the last 3 years. And so smart guy, obviously, doesn't know a lot about advertising or programmatic at all. And so I'm in there to explain this is what programmatic is. and have a definition, and I'm talking about the benefits, and I'm halfway through this conversation, and he goes, wait a minute. So you know you're going to be disrupted. You know, like, look at Amazon. They came in with Amazon Web Services, and they just disrupted the marketplace. You're just going to be disrupted with the technology. And I was like, huh? Oh, he thinks that I'm saying we should build the technology. No. So I was like, all right, I got to get this back on track. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And so I started whiteboarding without a net in front of the CEO. And I explained, you know, there's the transaction. We all know it, right? There's the supply, SSP, and how it connects to exchanges and publishers and that from a brand all the way down. And I explained that, and it helped to get us back on track. And then he started asking the right kind of questions you would imagine, like, who are these people who do this work? Are they like engineers? No, they're more like traders, you know, but it helped to get the conversation back on track.
Yeah, awesome. I loved your advice around the strategic principles of a company and how everything's going to be different for all organisations. It's a great message, I think, for everyone in the room. The agency plays a really important role in this market. But when you ask people to raise their hand, and were you surprised by that? And how has, whether you were surprised by that or not, but then also how has that changed your relationship with your agency?
I wasn't surprised from what I understand about the Australian market, but I'm glad you bring up the agency question, because I wouldn't want people to think, oh, she's brought everything in-house, she's anti-agency, right? I am not. I value the partnership of the agency that we work with, and it's a great relationship. And throughout this whole process, it was very important to me, just from an integrity point of view, to be really transparent about, we're considering this, we've made this decision, here's why, so that they knew throughout. And it's changed the kind of conversation we're having. There's still a conversation. It's not like, hands off, that's their world, we don't touch it. So take your product, and you guys are doing some really interesting cross-channel work. There's some interesting tools for planning. My team, programmatically, cannot live in a vacuum and work with that. That is a connection point with our agency to take advantage of those and decide how we make use of them. And it's also having them rethink some of the solutions, like they are talking to us about. Okay, so, you know, is there a role for you to tap into some of the PMP deals that we negotiate? You know, would you want to think of us as, you know, as an offering that way? So the conversations are still there, and the partnership is just as alive as much as ever.
Awesome. One last question, and I'll ask the audience if they've got any questions. But taking control of your data, owning your own data, is a big step. How is that paying off for you?
Well, it's still early days in that it took quite a while to select the contracts, to, you know, get them going, to start to integrate the tools in the marketing stack. And so, but an interesting thing has happened along the way. So first, data has almost been this enabler for the conversations that you could argue should have been happening at the company. So for example, some of the marketers at Intel today, they can talk about the definition of first-party, second-party, third-party data. They couldn't have done that a year ago. And more importantly, how they can use that to gain advantage in what we're trying to do for their marketing efforts. And we're starting to bridge the gap between the sales guys and the marketing guys, because the sales guys are now starting to think about, okay, I'm going to tell you more about this lead that works for me, that's a sales qualified lead, and what those attributes are. And the marketers are like, great, I'm going to do more work to target against those attributes. It's not just about shoving people over the finish line, but it's about the right people, you know, right, that sales are interested in. So that, and of course, the transparency, we do have a much greater insight into the costs along the supply chain and data that is useful for us in targeting, and that's working or maybe not working so much.
Yeah, awesome. Are there any questions in the audience? Yeah, Christina. Can you
Are you really going to throw the box at her?
I'll pass it to you this time. You get the pleasure of throwing it. You have to talk into it, apparently.
I just wanted to ask about the training and education internally, client side. So have you had to do a lot of digital and data training to help? So with sales and marketing and just generally?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we are lucky in that we are considered a center of excellence. So there's sort of a notion of, okay, this team's, they've got this, I know, but you don't want to just live in a vacuum. You want to be able to connect with the business units and the marketers and the marketing strategy groups to be able to talk about the value here especially when we come together as integrated groups and talk about the customer journey. How can data inform the customer journey to help us decide different messages creatively, how we customize our landing pages, maybe what we do differently in media. So that will continue to be an ongoing process.
Any of the cost saving involved in those presentations, or 12 months on, you're not looking at cost saving, it's just efficiencies in the business?
Yeah, cost savings is a good way, especially when it comes to like finance people to go, okay, we're gonna let you go ahead and do this. But to me, the bigger thing that I'm more excited about is the insights and what it can do for our business and how it can change outcomes. That is far more interesting to me than, the cost savings that might be associated with this.
Any other questions? Final question from me then. For everybody in the room, what would be the one piece of advice that you would like to give for people who are navigating this space right now?
Well, I did talk about the simplicity, but in some ways you could argue that's almost like presentation 101. Really know your audience and tailor your message to them. So the bigger piece of advice, I think, is about acknowledging that we are going to live in a multi-model world. And so for brands to understand what's right for you based on your strategic principles, and just as important for agencies and ad tech companies to have differentiated service offerings and product offerings that meet those models.
Excellent. Julie Keshmiry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julie, Sam, thank you so much. Now, before we move on, we have got a lot of space here, so let's take a minute to get you all seated and get you all comfortable. Let's be one big happy family together.